Alex was a young boy whose parents doted on him. In their eyes, he was the perfect child, always doing the right thing, never doing wrong, and always getting the best grades. He was the best at everything he did. Every time he did do something wrong, they would shift the blame onto whoever was with him at the time. Simply put, he was the golden child, which put an immense level of pressure on him to be perfect. He was out with his parents at the moment. They were in town looking at the shops when one of his friends turned up and tried to talk to him. He chatted to him for a minute before his parents stepped in to put a stop to it. They said it was lovely to see him before ushering Alex out of the shop. As they walked through the crowd, Alex shoved past someone just to keep up with his parents. When the person took issue with it, Alex acted innocent while his parents turned the tables on the person, blaming him for getting in their son's way. They left the man feeling angry because they'd blamed him for getting in their perfect little boy's way. Another thing Alex had to be proud of was the fact that he'd won every award for everything the school offered awards in, including all the trophies for winning every event in Sports Day for the last 4 years, which he'd won by cheating. But his parents refused to believe he'd do such a thing, shifting the blame onto other children competing, getting those children banned from the day, and securing him the win. He'd won every Best Player trophy for every musical orchestral battle, winning the prize for Best School Orchestra for the whole orchestra, as well as the award for Best Player in the orchestra. He had already achieved grade 8 for every instrument he'd ever learned, including the piano, tuba, trumpet, saxophone, violin, guitar, drums, and lots of others. He had a pretty extraordinary life during his first decade on Earth due to his golden child status, and every time he tried to own up to his mistakes and wrongdoings, his parents would disregard it and find a way to blame someone else, as you saw earlier with that man in the crowd he shoved past, for which they blamed the man. Alex truly was a golden child, so much so that all his parents' narcissistic praise had given him a golden hue, and the more praise he received, the more golden he physically turned. If they kept it up, he literally would be their golden child, as he would turn into gold.
Semajically AI Series 2, Episode 16, The Crazy Australian. It all began when a young man named Daniel Osborne was walking through the outback as he always did in the evenings. He had come prepared with 5 liters of water on his person, as well as a picnic fit for a king. As he reached the middle of the outback, he found himself walking through a mysterious dark woodland, which baffled him to no end as he lost sight of where he was going and ended up stepping in a bed of stinging nettles. He tried to set himself free from the nettles, but he couldn't because something was keeping him stuck there. The more he fidgeted, the more stuck he became, and the more frustrated he became too. It was what happened that night, as he stood there stuck amongst the nettles, growing crazier by the second. A storm struck the woods along with the outback surrounding it. As Daniel tried to keep warm, the thunder got louder, and a bolt of lightning struck him, surging thousands of electric volts into him. He was lifted out of his nettle bed into the air. As he was being electrocuted by the lightning, a series of bright flashes flickered through his eyes, and he was thrown across the ground until he landed face down on the hard, dirty, wet and cold woodland floor before clearing up. He awoke to find himself sitting by a tree, not knowing what that storm was, or what it had done to him. He soon found out as he got up, feeling lots of pain from the lightning and the wound he found on his chest. He rubbed the wound with his hand, felt a moment of relief, and took his hand away to find that his wound had healed. As he took in the fact he'd not only survived a violent storm but could now heal wounds just by rubbing them, he began to wonder what else he could do. Over the next few days, he learned that he could teleport by closing his eyes and holding his nose, read minds by placing his hands on people's heads, shoot electricity from his hands just by holding them out in front of him, replicate himself by running a hand down his body, and time travel by pressing his hands together and walking to his right for the future, or left for the past while visualizing where he wanted to go. He'd also realized that he'd stopped aging at his current age. All these powers had driven him mad with obsession and self-satisfaction. We know he could heal from normal wounds by rubbing the wound with his hands, but what about mortal wounds? At that moment, he walked into a branch that was sticking out from a tree without even seeing it, impaling him right through the chest. He surely is dead now, right? Oh no, what's this? He's waking up. His wound is healing very slowly. It's going to take a while before he's back on his feet. He's immortal. He cannot die. Crazy, huh?
In January 1988, David and Ellie Banks were at St. Agatha's Maternity Hospital where their baby daughter had just been born. They named her Lauren, after her maternal grandmother. They loved her to pieces and were very excited to watch her grow up. Within the next 3 years, they watched proudly as Lauren learned to walk, talk, and use the bathroom. At the age of 3, Lauren started to show signs of being gifted, as she could already read books intended for children who were 8 to 12 years old, and was writing her own stories about a world of toys. 9 years later, as Lauren sat down in her Year 8 English class, the teacher asked the class if they had any stories they'd written recently, or when they were younger. Lauren showed him one of her Toy World stories she'd written as a 5-year-old, and he was impressed. "You wrote this when you were 5?" he asked as he read it. "Yes, sir," replied Lauren. "And this was the 65th story you ever wrote?" he asked. "Yes, sir. I wrote the original story when I was 3, replied Lauren. This revelation really impressed the entire class, who wondered why she hadn't got her stories published. She showed them her most recent installment, which was an origin story for one of the many areas in Toy World. 7 years later, she was approached by a literary agent who was willing to help her publish her stories into books so children all over the world could enjoy them. She excitedly presented him with her entire library of her Toy World stories, and he was super impressed by them. Together, they compiled each collection of 6 stories into single volumes of manuscripts and started posting them to different publishers to get the ball rolling. Between 2008 and 2015, the first 8 books in Lauren Banks' Toy World series were published, and each little book was an instant bestseller. By 2016, she was married to a man named Clarence Marcus, who had taken on her family name, and he supported her literary career. The 9th book of her Toy World series was published and released, becoming an instant bestseller. In 2018, she gave birth to their son Franklin. They loved him to pieces and wanted him to grow up as a respectable and loving young man. She'd taken a 5-year break from writing the next wave of her Toy World series of little children's books. Clarence was very proud of them both, but had to return to his job as a firefighter after 2 days. In 2023, as Frank started school, he wanted to share his mother's stories with his friends. Lauren was thrilled to see her son wanting to share her stories with his classmates, and allowed him to. She also began writing her next book in the Toy World series after a 5-year hiatus from writing and publishing them. She was going to write 8 new short stories for this new book. In 14 years, she'd already published more than 15 books in her long-running series of children's books. This was owing to books 15 to 17 having all been published in 2018, 2 to 3 months before Frank was born. This was the 18th book overall, but the first of the 5th generation of books in the series. Here we are now, and Lauren is 37 years old and a multi-billionaire from writing these books. She and Clarence have 2 children, having had a daughter named Chloe in the past 2 years, and there are currently 26 books in the Toy World series across 5 generations of the ever-popular children's storybooks.
Agent Cal Carter was an agent who worked for the Time Enforcement Agency, whose job it was to monitor and protect the timeline, as well as prevent any crimes against time from being committed. If any time crimes were committed, they were sent back to where and when the crime was being committed, usually in groups of 4 or 5 to hunt down and arrest the suspects, which in some cases were local to the time period. The year was 3458 and the Time Enforcement Agency was located in the basement underneath a long-abandoned building, as their work was so dangerous it had to be kept secret from the public because of their use of time machines, vehicles or handheld to do their job. Carter was one of the senior agents and was trusted to carry out solo missions if he so chose, but he wisely chose to take a fellow agent with him. He also wore a golden watch on his wrist which took the travelers back in time by pressing the reverse button and forwards by pressing the fast forward button. He had just received his latest mission, which was to go back to the year 2024 to chase down and apprehend the criminal known as Babyface, who was causing havoc by stealing from hardware shops and killing people with the stolen hardware. He chose agents Hannah Hawley and Daniel Goddard as his teammates, grouped with them. They all had the time watches. They all set their watches to take them back to 2024 and pressed the activate buttons in perfect synchronization, causing their personal time to rewind. They arrived in a busy city with cars zooming by and people bustling around. They checked their watches, which told them they'd arrived in the year 2024. As they started looking for their Babyface, they learned they were in London, and now they needed to hide their identities, so they adopted the personas of normal police agents who were hunting down an ordinary criminal. Babyface, a 36-year-old man whose face resembled that of a baby, was busy robbing a bank with a crowbar he'd stolen from a hardware store. His face was hidden by a mask so nobody could see it, and he managed to steal over £800,000 and flee into the back street to get away. Unfortunately, some youths had found his time machine and were trying to steal it. He pushed them away, threatening them to stay away from his getaway car, climbed in and tried to start it, but was thwarted by Agent Goddard, who disabled the time machine and sent it back to the future before grabbing Babyface and handcuffing him. The youths left, and Agents Carter and Hawley arrived at the scene. They placed him under arrest for theft of a special vehicle and abusing the timeline for his own personal gain, as well as theft of deadly weapons and use of said weapons with intent to kill. As they led him away, they removed his mask to expose him to the crowd. The crowd laughed at him because of his baby-faced appearance. The agents led him to a field just outside the city, set their watches to return them to their base in the 35th century, and two of them set off with their suspect, whilst Carter was left behind because his watch had decided to malfunction. So he took it off and tried to fix it while walking back into the city, which was surprisingly empty. He was surprised by this, as moments before there were lots of people around. Just as he managed to fix the watch and was about to strap it to his wrist, he was retrieved by the agency, causing him to drop it in a grass embankment on a pavement. Just as he arrived back in the base, he noticed he no longer had his watch, as a result of not having time to get it back on his wrist before they retrieved him. As he'd completed his mission, his commissioner gave him a pass from losing his watch, in the hopes of someone finding it. He was glad Carter and his team had caught and arrested Babyface and was safe home in 3458 before anything was found out.
Semajically AI Series 2, Episode 19, Nursery Crimes. Do you remember such innocent characters as Goldilocks, Little Miss Muffet, Little Red Riding Hood, and others? What if I told you they aren't as innocent as you think they are? They are utter criminals. Here are just a few of them. Simple Simon was a young boy who loved going to the fair and eating pies. He left his house without any money one day and decided to look in at the fair. On his way there, he met a pieman and stopped him. "Let me taste your wares," he said. "Show me first your penny," replied the pieman. "Sir, I have not any," replied Simple Simon. "No, you have not any pie?" replied the pieman, and he went on his way. When Simple Simon made it to the fair, he went to the pie stand, looked around, took a pie, and put it in his sack. As he walked away, he was caught by the pieman, who took him to the police, who searched his sack to find the stolen pie. Simple Simon was arrested and taken to jail for theft. In court, he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Goldilocks was a young girl who went for a walk in the woods when she came across a cottage standing alone. She peered in the window and discovered it was empty. So she decided to break and enter to see what she could find. Once inside, she saw a table with 3 chairs. Deciding to sit down, she tried the big chair, but it was too hard. She tried the middle-sized chair, but it was too soft. But when she tried the small chair, it broke under her weight. She felt hungry after that and noticed 3 bowls of porridge on the table. The first bowl was too hot. The second bowl was too cold. but the third bowl was just right, so she ate it all up. Feeling tired, she climbed the stairs and entered the bedroom where there were 3 beds. The big bed was too hard, the middle bed was too soft, but the small bed was just right, so she got in and fell asleep. The inhabitants of the cottage came home to a broken chair, an empty porridge bowl, and 3 messy beds with someone sleeping in the third bed. Goldilocks woke up to find herself face to face with 3 ferocious-looking bears. She was so frightened she tried to run, but the bears apprehended her and handed her over to the police, who arrested her for burglary, and she was sentenced to life in prison. Little Miss Muffet had been given a bowl of curds and whey by her father, Lord Muffet. She went out to eat it in the sun. She came to a tuffet under a tree and decided to sit there and eat her curds and whey. Just as she started to eat, a spider came down and sat down beside her. She was so frightened she threw the bowl and ran away. She came back with a brick and smashed the spider. The animal rights activists called round with the police to inspect the spider to find it dead. Little Miss Muffet was arrested for murdering a spider and sentenced to life in prison. As all 3 of these criminals were convicted as children, they had to be eligible for parole in 10 years, and were all granted parole after a decade behind bars and released on condition that they behaved themselves. Simple Simon got a job as a waiter at the restaurant. Goldilocks joined the nursery rhymes division of the Fictonia Police Service, and Miss Muffet returned to Muffet Manor where she was welcomed home warmly, and all was forgotten.
Semajically AI Series 2, Episode 20. Ellie and the Watch. Ellie Jones was a young girl with a powerful obsession with time travel and would give anything for the chance to travel through time. Little did she know she was about to get her wish. As she was walking home from school one Tuesday afternoon, she noticed a gleam of golden metal in the grass embankment on the pavement. Curious, she decided to look at it closely. It was a watch that looked like a normal wristwatch, which displayed the current time of day. It was then that she noticed the other strange settings on the watch and watched as it started to glow an electric blue and strapped itself to her wrist. "Ellie, what is this thing? It's not a normal watch," she said to herself. She then noticed that the watch was now displaying a screen for different sets of coordinates. "Ellie, what the?" she said in surprise. She tried tweaking with the buttons on the side of the watch and was surprised to find herself standing in a field on a bright sunny day. She checked the watch. It was now 2 days earlier. She had time-traveled 2 days into the past. As she left the field, she started to notice the things that were going on. A strange man, hiding behind a full-head mask, arrived in a time machine, hid it somewhere, and went to commit some crimes. She used the watch to time jump to the bank to warn them of the impending crime before time jumping too after the robbery. She then went to the alley behind the store and removed the time machine before the gang of youths could find it. Finally, she time jumped to just after she found the watch and took it home. The next day at school, she showed it to her friends as a gift from her parents, when, in reality, it was a time-traveling wristwatch with no known origin, to them anyway. After school, Ellie decided to try and learn the origin of the watch, so she used it to travel to the year 2075 to witness a scientist modifying an old golden wristwatch with some new components that would make it special. As he did this, the watch on her wrist began to glow. She'd learned when it was invented. After that, she used it to travel to the year 2150, where she learned of the founding of a police department designed to protect time and prevent any crime related to it, and saw the first generation of time agents. After using the watch to visit the years 22, 45, 23, 60, 24, 22, 25, 80, 26, 03, 27, 90 and 3086, she arrived in an abandoned building filled with agents working on trying to track down the missing time watch. She checked the watch to find that she had finally made it to the year 3458. She knew what she had to do. She approached the first time agent she could find. Agent Lucy Vincent helped her get the watch off her wrist and reset it to its original settings. She thanked her kindly for all her help and for returning the watch. Ellie, VO, what is this place? Agent Lucy Vincent showed her around the office and introduced her to some of her fellow agents, including the agent who lost the watch in the first place. They showed the video diary of her finding the watch and using it to try to change history as far as Babyface's crime spree was concerned, only to show her she'd failed, as the agents were still sent back to apprehend him and lose the watch she found. She was meant to find the watch and try to prevent the crime spree. The Time Commissioner came to greet her. He was very pleased to meet her and shook her hand. He thanked her for finding the watch and trying to help them. He returned the watch to her, as it was now genetically coded to fit her wrist. She promised to be careful with it, as she set it to return to her own time. She arrived back in 2025 and now an honorary time agent entrusted with the responsibility of keeping the timeline in check. She went home and started plotting out ideas for an agency that was designed to police the time continuum and prevent any crime related to it. Was it her destiny to find this watch? Was she going to grow up to become the founder of the time enforcement agency she'd just visited?
In a land of lush green fields and trees stood a dome of green grass in which there lived a quartet of colourful creatures whose faces resembled babies. All four of these creatures had brown eyes. 2 were male and 2 were female. All had elf-like ears, antennae on their heads, and screens on their stomachs. Tinky Winky was the biggest of the 4 creatures. He was a purple male with a triangular antenna. He carried a red handbag and could be silly sometimes. Dipsy was the second biggest. He was a green male with a dipstick antenna and wore a cowskin open-topped hat. Lala was the second smallest. She was a yellow female with a whirly antenna and played with a giant orange bouncy ball. And Poe was the smallest. She was a red female with a bubble blow stick antenna and rode a pink and blue scooter. Their diet was a liquid substance that was either orange or strawberry flavored. It was called tubby custard, and they went and made it using a machine in one of the windows. And slices of round toast with smiley faces on them. They called it tubby toast, and they got it from a tower toaster in one corner of their dining room, which just consisted of a round table with 4 seats attached to it. There was a slide built in the house, around the corner from a round platform, with control panels of buttons and levers, and 4 sponges in their own compartments. In their bedroom, there were 4 beds that resembled baby cradles with tinfoil blankets. Voice trumpets often came up singing them rhymes and music and making announcements. Every day, a magic windmill would summon them to a field to test their transmissions, and they would climb a hill, and then one of them would receive a transmission on their screen from the world beyond. Magical events would also take place quite often at the summon of the windmill. Their planet's sun is bright yellow and has a baby's face in it. The custard machine worked like this. They would power it on summon a bowl, lower a blue mechanical arm, and use a red button to dispense the custard into the bowls, which were just crazy straws shaped into bowls. And the toaster worked like this. One of the creatures would push a round button, and then join the others at the table while 6 lights lit up before the toaster somersaulted each piece of toast onto round plates in front of each seat. Their vacuum cleaner was a blue robot, with eyes that sprung out and went patrolling the house and cleaning up after them. These 4 creatures were an alien species known as Teletubbies, and on this day in particular, they were walking around when a strong wind began to blow, whisking them all off their feet, sending them whirling around like crazy. It soon deposited them in a sandy landscape, leaving them lying there wondering where they were. They weren't in Teletubbyland anymore. I can tell you they had arrived on Earth in the year 347,976 BC, and this was the beginning of their new lives.